What is up, guys? Welcome back to the Sports Report with me, Marco Hernandez. We're doing something a little different this time. This time I have my brother, Juan Hernandez, here next to me. Juan, like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, what's up, man? Nothing. I'm just excited to hop on and talk about our favorite subject.
Football. Yeah. Love football, don't we? It's so
Yes.
fun. So fun. So fun.
Not just football, but also our favorite team as well.
Yeah, and that team, if you're not aware yet, clearly if you're not listening to my podcast, then you're not a real fan, but it is the Chicago Bears. And last time I talked, it was talking about right before the Green Bay Packers game was the last game podcast that I made, and I was talking about how important that game was in the future of Justin Fields, Matt Eberflus, the whole coaching staff, and the Bears organization as a whole. And that game was a shit show, absolutely terrible. Like I remember coming out of that game feeling absolutely terrible, and I remember saying before the podcast or during the podcast rather that we're going in with so much momentum going into this Green Bay Packers game, but everything could change if we lose and if we lose badly against Green Bay, and ultimately that's what happened.
Yeah. I think it was kind of. I think the big question obviously was what would happen with Fields, what would happen with Eberflus. I think there was reports right before the game that Eberflus was going to likely come back. So his, status was already kind of decided. But Fields, he was coming off a huge game against the Falcons. So there was a lot of optimism, I would say, for a lot of the Fields truthers, myself being included. I didn't really want there to be a next chapter to turn the page. But after that Green Bay game, I think it was kind of clear. And not only that Green Bay game, but also I think the first round of the playoffs, when you see somebody like CJ Stroud, even Jordan Love, the last half of the season, there's been like huge improvements. And that's just something that we have still yet to see from Fields. We have always seen the flashes, but we're not seeing the consistency, as much as it pains me to say.
Yeah, and I myself am included in that Justin Fields truthers, that Justin Fields camp where we want to see him succeed. We want to see him because he has all the intangibles, right? He has everything that you can ask for from a quarterback: the leadership, the physical skills, the physical abilities, and like you said, we've seen all the flashes, but we haven't seen it consistently enough to warrant him potentially going forward as the Chicago Bears franchise quarterback.
Yeah, and it kind of sucks. And I mean, it just sucks because we everything you see and everything you read and everything that people say after the games are how much Justin is loved in the locker room, how much of a leader he is, how much all the guys like want him to be number one. Anytime DJ Moore talks in the interview, he's always defending Justin, saying that's his QB, saying that's who he wants to catch passes from next year. But I think the reality is, if you're Ryan Poles, you have to kind of just take a step back and just kind of evaluate what's going to take you to the next step. I'm sure we'll talk about it as far as Eberflus coming back, but that alone, I think, is kind of a red flag in the sense that I don't want to go down the same path of keeping the same head coach and then getting a new QB, because we've seen the last three times that's literally been a recipe for disaster. So I'm kind of intrigued as to what's going to happen. Not saying, I mean, there still is possibility that Fields does come back, right? I don't think that's out of the question, but um, I think in general, most people, if we want most level-headed Bears fans would say if we want to get over the hump, it might be with somebody else, unless we, as we'll dive into, I'm sure, the offensive coordinators, if we find someone that kind of really plays to his strengths.
Yeah, so you mentioned Matt Eberflus coming back, and it was a lot of the speculation before the Green Bay Packers game of how much impact would a Green Bay Packers win or loss have on Matt Eberflus's future. Ultimately, I don't think it had that much of an impact because how do you start off the season losing the way that you did against Green Bay and ending the season the same way? Even though you had improvements, the defense improved throughout the season since he took over as defensive coordinator. The defense has gotten a lot of takeaways. The hits principle that he talks about a lot. A lot of the players started to you started seeing the progression, and you saw the performance by the defense, especially since the addition of Montez Sweat. But you kind of add the three collapses against Denver, Cleveland, Detroit, and then the prior to going on this run in the middle of this season, he lost 14 games in a row. Like those blemishes on his record, they're not ones that you can just look past. And obviously, you have to put everything together. You can't just look at one certain game or put a bundle of games together. It has to be a whole look at his entire career as a Chicago Bears head coach. And you can kind of understand why Ryan Poles decided to stay status quo and stay with Matt Eberflus because a lot of the locker room, as you said, especially specifically the defense, has wanted him to or has praised him and how well he has been coaching them and how well Ryan Poles has been praising him for how much he has handled the adversity throughout the season. Although I don't know how much credit you can get when overcoming adversity that you created. Like his coaches were the ones that he picked were the ones that ended up leaving for various reasons we don't know yet. Alan Williams having to resign. His running backs coach had to resign due to all HR reasons, which we probably won't find out the specific reasons why they left, but that's on his record too. That's under his umbrella, and ultimately everything has to come together. So, like you said, it's kind of it's frustrating as a fan to continuously watch this team not align the important people in the building together in terms of their timelines. Um, Kevin Warren was hired after Ryan Poles came in, and whether or not Matt Eberflus was a candidate when Ryan Poles came in, that's also a question. I don't think we can say that now because Ryan Poles has decided to keep him. But now we have this weird trickle effect where you have the GM and then you have the coach, but then you don't have the president. And now the president has to watch over the GM and the coach, and then decide if they're even the ones that he wants. So it's just the circle of suck, pretty much. We've been under this cycle for the last 10, 15 years here in the Bears. So, and then it also trickles down to the quarterback. Um, like I said, well, I think we're both in agreement that Matt Eberflus, him staying isn't the right move. Um, is there someone that you would have liked over Matt Eberflus going in to coach the Bears?
Um, yeah, I mean, I will say I will answer your question, but I am a little torn still on Eberflus. I know we've texted about it and we've talked about it, but like I agree. I don't think losing 14 straight games, all the meltdowns this year, the coaches that had to resign. I don't think that should be overlooked, but I also think this team has responded, and I think there is a lot to that, right? I think it is easy to um, you know by week 3, week 4, we could have easily you know just called it in, mailed it in for the season, right? Especially after that Kansas City game, we got blown out. That we were levels below what Kansas City was at that point. But we responded. I mean, we finished the season strong. I think, and of course, to that point, I think it was because of the defense. I think there's no question. As a lifelong Bears fans, it's always about the defense. That's always how we win games is with the defense. So I do think there is something to be said there. So while yes, I do not agree with a lot of the decisions, I think he's doing something correct, right? He is doing something, especially after the Montez Sweat trade. So I think him and Poles are in alignment when it comes to the defensive side of the ball, and I think we do have some playmakers. They have drafted well early returns, right? So I think there is upside there. Um, but again, I still think that to answer your original question, I think one any of these top, I mean, I can't remember the last coaching market like this, right? I think there's so many talented coaches right now, and not only talented but also proven, right? Obviously we're not going to go after like a Belichick or anything like that, but I do think people like Vrabel, Harbaugh, I think, is the number one choice that a lot of Bears fans have been clamoring over. Right,
Yeah.
his ties to Chicago. I think he would have been a perfect fit here. So it is disappointing because I think ultimately, as a GM, like your one task should be always to improve your football team, whether that's coaches or players. And I think if there's an opportunity to upgrade a position, then you should go out there and do that. And I think that's the same thing with coaching. So I would have loved to see a bigger name out here. But it sounds like we're gonna stay with Eberflus and then hope to get lucky with an offensive coordinator that can really call the plays and kind of run the show on that side of the ball.
So, what would you say to the um, so for example, right? We've seen it here in Chicago plenty of times where the coach or the manager of the team is currently play, doing well with the team, doing well with the roster, but then a coaching candidate comes up that was not expected at first when or didn't think that was going to be available, and then they take them upgrade the coach. So, for example, Ozzie Guillen with the White Sox back in 2004, and then you talk about just recently with the Cubs, they fired Ross, and they hired in Craig Console. Also with the Cubs again when they brought in Joe Madden, and he won the Super Bowl or sorry, a World Series with the Cubs. So I think with my frustrations necessarily, I can see your argument with Eberflus and keeping him and kind of building on this, and I think there is some truth to that, to the element of Matt Eberflus is building a roster, and that team currently is all behind him. I think we had the opportunity, like you said, with Harbaugh, or potentially someone like Ben Johnson from the Lions, the offensive coordinator, or someone else. I don't know who else would have been necessarily available, or like you said, Mike Vrabel was an unexpected head coaching candidate that was available. One of those guys I think would have been an upgrade. And if you're always constantly looking to upgrade your roster, if you're Ryan Poles, so you're always constantly looking to like upgrade your quarterback. Braxton Jones, we don't know if he's going to be the left tackle of the future. Will they draft one later in the draft this later in the year? Why not apply that same thinking to the head coaching position? So that's just my frustration with it. I think I'm still on board with Matt Eberflus. Um, there's not really a I mean, there's no really can't gotta see it through. So he's made his decision, and we're just gonna have to see how it goes next year. This actually brings us right into the offensive coordinator search, which that you mentioned. What Lovie Smith struggled a lot in during his Bears tenure as a head coach. He always had a great defense. He had a great running backs. He had a great special teams, but he could never get the offensive coordinator right, and that's why the offense struggled with under Lovie Smith constantly. You can see that kind of with what with a lot of defensive coaches nowadays. Mike Tomlin has struggled to find an offensive coordinator for a while. Bill Belichick has struggled to find an offensive coordinator as well. Brandon Staley with when he was with the Chargers, struggled to find an offensive coordinator and an offense to get that Justin Herbert and that offense clicking. What position? Clearly, Ryan Poles thought that Matt Eberflus had a plan at offensive coordinator, or had some candidates that could come in and be an offensive coordinator that could drive this offense forward. Because what we're not looking for whether it's Fields, whether it's Caleb Williams, whether it's Drake May. We're not looking for a gradual improvement in the offense. We need major improvement from the offense. And I don't know how much of whether or not Matt Eberflus can do that with the specific candidates that are coming out. Like, for instance, they just interviewed Greg Roman. They've interviewed the offensive coordinator at Seattle, Shane Waldron, Clint Kubiak, the son of Gary Kubiak, who is currently the quarterback's coach of the San Francisco 49ers. So it's coming from that same kind of Kyle Shanahan tree, which I think what they're trying to do. Greg Roman, not so much. He's more run heavy instead of West Coast. But what are your thoughts on potentially Matt Eberflus trying to find that offensive coordinator and whether or not he can solve that issue on offense?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think like just to take it a step back, I think that's why a lot of um, fans are probably hesitant or not happy that Eberflus is coming back, is because one, everything that we've talked about, but then two, also it's just this is a repeating cycle that has happened for Bears fans and for seasons, decades, generations at this point, right? So I think part of me is trying to be optimistic, but then the other part of me is it needs to be realistic and know that we kind of already know how this story is going to end, right? And I think that's the part that makes it really tricky when hiring an offensive coordinator. Again, I know we texted about this, but like even when if you hire an offensive coordinator and he does his job well, that guy's gone. Some other team next year is going to be looking for a head coach, and you know what? They're going to go after the offensive minded head coach, because that's a lot what the NFL has kind of trended towards, is those offensive minds that because then at that point you don't have to hire anybody else, right? If he's your head coach, he's not going anywhere. You can
Yeah.
keep him for as long as you want. So I think that's the tricky part is even if we do hire a great offensive mind, what's there to say that next year, the Panthers or the Cardinals or somebody else is looking to make a move, and um, they're coming to interview our guy, right? And why wouldn't you if you turn around and you make that leap on offense? So I think that's kind of the fundamental issue with keeping Eberflus. Um, but regardless, I mean, some of those names, again, I am excited. I don't think I don't know. It can't get much worse than Getsy. He also had moments, but the short yardage stuff was terrible, right? I think anybody that saw the Bears play a lot of the times, they would go through flashes, specifically the offense, where they were clearly trying to make Justin Fields into something that he's not. Doing all these short yardage, quick throws. And part of that was probably because of the offensive line and the lack of weapons over the last year. But I think even this year, what we saw when Justin had time and when they actually dialed up plays that featured to its strength, he was good. He was productive. He's not a I'm gonna go out there and win the game, put the team on my back kind of quarterback. I think we've seen enough to kind of say that, but he does have moments where if everything around him is correct, then he is able to make those plays, and he is able to win some games. So I think really whoever the quarterback is for the next year or two, it sounds so simple, but it's like you really just need to put him in a position to succeed, right? It's like what does he do best, and how do you maximize that, right? And I hope everybody is aligned again, like you said, from the front office down, the president, the GM, the head coach, all the way down to the quarterback. I hope they're aligned on what that looks like, and what they want the offense to look like. Otherwise, again, we already know how this is going to end. It could be a disaster. And this time next year, we're talking about how we just fired Eberflus.
Okay, so that we kind of talk about the draft process that Ryan Poles has to go through, right? Him passing up on C.J. Stroud last year. The idea of him not passing up on another quarterback this year when you have the number one overall pick back to back years. You see how good C.J. Stroud has been over playing against the Cleveland Browns, who were one of the better defenses, if not the best defense in the NFL in his first playoff game. You see how good a Jordan Love has been, and you mentioned it earlier in the pod, how his development from the first game up until now, he looks like one of the better quarterbacks in the league, and how he dismantled again the Dallas Cowboys, who were one of the better defenses in the NFL as well. So watching those two quarterbacks play, one that you passed up on last year and one that is in your division, your biggest rival, Jordan Love and the Green Bay Packers, how do you even contemplate passing up the opportunity of having, if Caleb Williams is everything that everyone says, this generational talent, and I know everyone throws around that generational talent way too often, but if you truly believe that he is better for the Chicago Bears than Justin Fields, then it's a no-brainer. You take him, you trade away Justin Fields, and see what kind of draft capital you can get for him. I think a lot of people are stuck on Justin Fields because, as we mentioned earlier, because he has everything that you want in a quarterback. He has everything. He's physical, like I said, he's a leader. The whole locker room is around him. He is a captain, and it's going to be difficult to remove that emotion from Justin Fields and just kind of look at it without any blurred vision, for lack of better terms. Then you just go in. What's the best decision for the football team? And that is, in my opinion, Caleb Williams. And I don't know what your thoughts are on the quarterback situation currently.
Yeah, I mean, I pretty much agree with everything you just said. I think I think it's last year was a little bit different in the sense of Bryce Young and CJ Stroud were obviously the two top picks, and they were, being debated pretty much all offseason. I think it was a consensus, though, that pretty much Bryce Young was the pick, right? So I think to hold it against polls might be a little bit unfair, just because I think it's hard to envision anybody thinking that CJ Stroud was going to be. He's already probably a top 6, 7 quarterback. We can talk about it at a different time, but he's definitely up there. Um, but I agree with your sentiment where if Caleb Williams was if he came out last year, I think he was probably the number one pick, right? So
Yeah.
I don't really think he did too much to hurt his stock too much. I know there's some stuff that comes out, about is he soft? Does he really care? Like whatever that stuff doesn't really bother me too much. But I think you're right. I think if Caleb Williams is 80%, 85% of what scouts and people have been talking about, I think it's a no brainer. I think you have to take him. I think it's again a opportunity to upgrade a position of need that we have obviously been looking for quite some time. And as much as it would hurt for Justin to go, we one thing about Poles is we have seen he's not afraid to kind of, at least from a player standpoint, to clean house, right? We saw veterans shipped out last year, in Roquan and I forget the defensive lineman. What's his name?
Robert Quinn.
The Hicks. Quinn. Yep, Quinn. So we've seen two veterans shipped out last year. So I think I do think, at least from a player standpoint, like I said, I think he's not afraid to make those moves. Um, so if I had to choose right now, I do think we're gonna take Williams, but it's January 16th. There's there's 4 months of upcoming speculation that I'm sure we're gonna be digesting every day. So
Yeah, and we have so much time to ponder about this, and I'm sure something's going to come up where we're going to change our mind for some reason, and we're going to look back at the Justin Fields highlights, and we're going to fall in love with him again and again and again, and make this whole argument over again. It's really a you're talking about rational thinking versus irrational thinking, and that's actually a really good point that you just brought up about Roquan Smith and Robert Quinn, is that Ryan Poles, even though the whole team was around Roquan Smith and Robert Quinn, they were the two kind of leaders on that defense. And we talk about how the whole team is around Justin Fields. It seems like Ryan Poles isn't really too worried about how the team views a specific player. He'll continue to upgrade the roster, and even if no matter how it'll hurt the chemistry. And I think he talks about the chemistry. He talked about in his last press conference about how he wants the team to be around every single player. He wants all the players on the roster to be together. But when it comes to potentially upgrading the roster, I don't think he has that emotional connection to any specific player. But we have seen him. Those are all players that he hasn't drafted before. So I think it's going to be an easier transition to go from Justin Fields to Caleb Williams, who he did draft.
yeah, yeah, that's a good point. About those aren't his players, you know, quote unquote. But I do think it's like kind of interesting because I'm like, if all these players understand, that at any point, like I wonder how the players think about it, right? Like if it's like at any point, are they does it make them want to be better every day, because they realize that, hey, um we've seen what this guy does, right? Like if you don't fit the system, then like you're out, right? So it's like, does it make you want to work harder? Does it make you want to come together? And and I have to think there's at least some type of culture that's being built there, right? Where it's like, hey, we understand that it's a business, we understand that like you're a great teammate, and we love you, and when you're out on the field you're giving it your all, but at the end of the day it is a business, and if you're not, making the team better or helping us win, then we'll see you in the off season, kind of thing, right? I think there is probably something to that, where the locker room probably is being, I guess, being, what's the right word? I don't want to say trained, but like, they are being, conditioned to have that line of thought, and maybe that's a good thing, right? I don't know. But yeah, I think that's kind of interesting with the way Poles has moved moved players around without hesitation.
Yeah, and there's always a scenario that people are throwing around with the possibility of maybe keeping Fields and trading away that the number one overall pick, because the value of that number one overall pick, you'll get a lot more for the number one overall pick than you would for Justin Fields. But I think that just kind of adds more to the reasoning why Ryan Poles should draft Caleb Williams and draft a quarterback. Because if other teams are willing to give you 3 first round picks or 2 first round picks and potentially a second round player, then that means they rate that player very highly. Now, Ryan Poles decided to pass on, like we said, Bryce Young and CJ Stroud. But that's because Carolina thought that Bryce Young was going to be the guy um, to lead their franchise, and they made the trade to the Bears, which ultimately has backfired on them massively. Um, is there a scenario, do you think, where Ryan Poles looks at the tape. He does his evaluations on the players and decides, maybe let me see if I could shop this and see what I can get. And if there is an offer that is truly, truly, I cannot refuse this kind of offer for this pick. Like, I don't know, the Oakland Raiders or Las Vegas Raiders come in, say, I'll give you a first round pick, this year's first round pick, next year's first round pick, and Max Crosby or something like that. Is there a scenario where you get or where Ryan Poles picks up the phone and another GM says, I'm going to make you an offer that you can't resist? And then you kind of move on with Fields and you kind of build out the roster with him.
Yeah, I mean, I think yeah. I mean, we just because we just saw it, right? We just saw it last year. It just happened where he got an offer that he can't refuse, and again, the prospects maybe aren't at the level that Caleb is, but I'm just curious as to how. It's kind of crazy to say this because as Bears fans and as the rest of the league is going, um, I'm curious as to how Poles thinks about roster construction because on one hand, if you do get a offer that you can't refuse, like you're going to be continue to be set up to build the roster out, and the only missing piece is the quarterback, right? Can you win like that? I don't think so, but I don't know. I mean, I think we've seen other teams come close. I think the difference is your margin of error has to be is so small because everything around the most important piece has to be perfect, right? So I would much rather have a quarterback in place that we can depend on and that we know is going to elevate teammates as opposed to the other way around. Um, but you know what? Who's not to say that we get the Godfather offer and we still draft a quarterback, right? It might not be number one, but we swing maybe later in the first round or a second rounder or third rounder, right? We've seen multiple quarterbacks work out as well. I think that's obviously taking a big risk as well, but I think if the roster is there, I think you can be competitive, and especially in the NFC, where things seem to be wide open. Um, maybe we get our own version of Brock Purdy, and we'll see how he does this weekend. But there is an opportunity still to to build out the rest of the roster, and I think it just depends again on his philosophy of roster construction. But um, I don't know. I mean, if you had to choose, would you take the Godfather offer, or would you, draft Caleb Williams, knowing what we know about the league and the importance of quarterbacks?
I think, like you said, it just depends on what the offer is truly and what Ryan Poles values. I think if you want to go into it thinking, like I said, just for the example that I put out there, you get Max Crosby to pair alongside with Montez Sweat. Then all of a sudden you have two elite pass rushers, and then you get the first round pick. I don't know exactly what the Raiders are picking this year, and you get their first rounder next year. You would assume that if they get someone like Caleb Williams, that roster around them, now they still have like Devontae Adams, but it'll still be probably like a top 15, top 10 potential pick. So you kind of have more draft capital and you move on with a ton of just first round picks in the future. But it kind of just all depends on what Ryan Poles does. And I think I'm at the point now where I'm in full, maybe not full trust in Ryan Poles, but I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt because of that trade that he did make with Carolina last year and what it has brought us now, getting us DJ Moore. We got Darnell Wright in that with the pick. We also got Tyreek Stevenson in one of those picks too, who looks like one of the better young corners in the league. And you get us the number one pick this year to potentially get a better prospect than of quarterbacks at least than it was last year in the draft class. So I think I'm at the point now where let Poles cook. Like we're gonna find out what Ryan Poles truly is, especially in his third season now as the general manager. We're gonna find out exactly what his philosophy in team building is and what he has, what positions he has an eye for when drafting. I think he has a good eye for offensive linemen because he got Braxton Jones in the 5th round. He got Darnell Wright, I think is going to be a stud right tackle. He has an eye for second defensive secondary players. You got Jaquan Brisker late in the round, in the 3rd round. You got Kyler Gordon. He got Tyreek Stevenson, Terrell Smith. I think he has an eye for defensive players. I think the real question is coming back. I think the real question is coming back if he has the eye for the quarterback and wide receiver too, because we've seen a couple of his picks. He swung and missed on Chase Claypool, swung and missed on Velus Jones, and I think the jury's still out on Tyler Scott. And the only real one he got was an established number 1 wide receiver that has done it with bad quarterbacks in the past, in DJ Moore. So it's going to be interesting to see which one of those, if he's going to be able to get those 2 positions right.
Yeah, and I think those are all excellent points, and I think that's exactly why he's going to draft a quarterback, because I think for him it's going to be his guy, and that also selfishly probably resets his clock, right? So he's like, all right, I just drafted a quarterback, I get another 2-3 years, see if this guy's the real deal, while I build out the rest of the roster, right? Because like you said, he has hit on numerous positions, right? He has built, because again, he took the full tear down and rebuild approach, right? A lot of the players that are on this team that are going to be on this team next year are his players, right? Those, they're either draft or free agency that he acquired, right? So I think there is signs there. So that's why I lean more towards him drafting that quarterback, just because it gives him an opportunity to show that he is able to select one. And then, like you said, from a wide receiver standpoint, we still have the number 9 pick as well, right? Like we are in regardless, we're in a great position, I think, because no matter what, if you take Caleb, chances are, there's this receiver class is also pretty deep. There's 3 that I think are probably going to be in the top 10, top 15. We take another receiver as well, then we're looking good, right? Like we just upgraded the offense and upgraded the 2 most important positions probably on the offense. And we go into next season ready to hopefully make a playoff push.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting. We have so much time to talk about. Again, we could be changing our minds on whether or not Justin Fields is the guy, or whether or not that Ryan Poles is going to ultimately take a quarterback. I think we're both kind of in agreement, though, now that it's ultimately going to be someone. Whether it may not be Caleb Williams, it may also. I think we're forgetting the part where maybe he trades down to 3 and takes maybe Jaden Daniels or something like that. He doesn't necessarily say, I don't think Caleb is a guy. Maybe we could get a haul and still pick our quarterback that we want, Jaden Daniels, Drake May, you know. So I think there's so many options on the table for Ryan Poles, and it also kind of makes it like you said, we're in a great position because we also get 9. We could get a left tackle if we deem necessary. If we don't think if he doesn't think that Braxton Jones is going to be the left tackle of the future, you could also get another edge rusher. You could get, like you said, another wide receiver. But I think it's going to ultimately come down. His future as a general manager of the Bears is going to be on the quarterback position and what he does with the number 1 overall pick. And so I think it's going to be really interesting to see, and whether or not he makes a decision before the combine, pre-free agency. He made that decision last year with Justin Fields trading away the number 1 pick a day before free agency started. So I think the timeline of when he decides to fully make that decision, I think is going to be interesting as well.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I mean, I think again, I think it's from his standpoint. I think it just makes sense to take a quarterback and kind of ride with the next guy, um, because again, there are still like we I think we can make a Lions esque jump next year, maybe a Texans type of jump. Again, we ended the season strong. I think there's no denying that. There's obviously pieces on the defensive side of the ball. We still have one of the most probably top three. I don't know the exact cap space that we have, but top three cap space. We have the number one pick. We have two top 10 picks. We have plenty of other second, third round picks as well. Um, so I think there's possibility to make a big jump, and I think again it all comes down to getting the quarterback right. So I think that's why he's going to try and swing for the fences and hopefully get that guy with the number one pick.
Yeah, and we need that guy. I'll tell you because, as I mentioned before, watching C.J. Stroud, watching Jordan Love in their first playoff games, and me predicting them not having because in the past, generally quarterbacks, rookie quarterbacks in their first playoff game generally do pretty poorly. They were absolutely amazing in the way they played and how they ran their offenses respectfully. So in the league now, you can't win with a mediocre or the average quarterback, or you need a truly elite guy that can run your offense. Not even someone like Dak Prescott, who has shown that he can be an elite quarterback, but when it comes to the big moments, he fails. That's kind of what we want to see. Also, just a side note from like Lamar Jackson, who everyone is kind of comparing Justin Fields to, in terms of style, not necessarily how good they are or how good they have been, because Lamar Jackson's about to win his second MVP, and Justin Fields, 3 seasons in, we're still having a conversation if he's even a franchise quarterback. But someone like Lamar Jackson, who we think is an elite quarterback, has kind of failed to do it in the postseason as well. So I think it's going to be important to see, like you said, with getting that guy. So um, just to kind of wrap things up here, kind of want to pick your brain at what you thought about the wild card weekend, what you're looking forward to in the divisional round coming up this weekend, and just some predictions. No pressure.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I the wild card weekend was. I mean, it's fun, right? There's football on three games on every day, right? I guess we had two Monday because of the snow. I think my overall takeaway, there's two takeaways from wild card weekend was, um, one, the quarterbacks, right? Like every team that won, pretty much, it was you can boil it down to either how well the quarterback played or how bad the quarterback played, right? And I think every matchup you can kind of look at that and see the teams that are advancing, like that's why they're advancing um, for the most part. I also think the play was just not that great. I think it was kind of sloppy. I don't know if the weather, there was a lot of bad weather in a lot of these games, so maybe that had something to do with it. But I think in general, I again was impressed with C.J. Stroud. Terrified that Jordan Love is that guy. And I think moving into the divisional round, I think the matchup I'm most excited for. Um, I think the NFC is interesting just because I mean, it's literally going to be the Lions or the Buccaneers that are in the conference championship,
Yeah,
which I think is kind of crazy. But I think the AFC, both matchups are going to be super fun, right? Like you got CJ Stroud against Lamar, and you want Lamar to show up. You want to see if CJ Stroud's going to like amaze us all again and take this team to the conference championship, one game away from the Super Bowl. That's insane. And then I think the headliner is obviously Bills and Chiefs, right? Like the rematch. You know, they've had so many classic games over the last couple years. The 13-second game from a couple years ago. So I'm most excited to see that game, and I think that's the last one on the last game of the weekend. So that's going to be a good one to kind of wrap things all up. So yeah, I'm stoked. I think my prediction still is the same as it was when the playoffs started. I think it's still Baltimore versus San Francisco. I just think they've kind of shown that they are the most elite teams in each conference. So I really hope we get that matchup. But yeah, how about you?
I agree with pretty much everything that you just said. There's a lot of, I think, with the addition of that seventh team, that last wild card spot has kind of, although the Packers got in with that last spot, I'm pretty sure, yeah, it was them. Teams like the Steelers, sometimes you're going to get a team like the Steelers getting in, and although they showed a little bit of a fight against the Bills, ultimately they're just not good enough to be in the playoffs. And a team like, you also saw someone like Philadelphia, like you said, a lot of the games were not very close. The score lines may have suggested that they were close. Like I think the Cowboys and Packers game ended up like 48-32, which that's only 16 points only, but at one point they were down 48-16. So the score lines may not show the actual the how lopsided most of the games were, aside from the Rams and Lions game that came down ultimately to 1 point. Um, I think the divisional round is going to be fun. Like you said, all those storylines, Lamar versus CJ Stroud and the 49ers, and how good Jordan Love can be against, probably, I know we'll say Jordan Love is a guy or he's elite. I think that's more so how bad Dallas is. We'll see how good they are against San Francisco. But, because that's a true test. But we will see that matchup. Somehow it's going to be Jared Goff or Baker Mayfield in the conference championship game, which I don't think anybody would have thought that.
Do you think, or have you thought about the fact that we could see a Packers Lions conference championship?
Not until now. You just put that in my brain right now.
could you
Yeah, no,
could you imagine?
that'd be awful. That'd be absolutely awful. I think you'd actually say at that point. I remember texting you earlier about like is Jared Goff and Jordan Love the two best quarterbacks in the NFC, and they're in our division. That would draft Caleb Williams. Okay, draft Caleb
Yeah,
Williams. That's all
I
I'm gonna
mean,
say.
yeah,
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 yeah.
yep, exactly.
But the other game, probably the best game of the weekend. I mean, they're all really good games, but like I said, Chiefs Bills is the last game of the weekend, and it's interesting because you said how many games they've played against each other. That was all at Arrowhead Stadium. This game is a little different. Now Patrick Mahomes is going for the first time in his career on a road playoff game, not including the Super Bowl, which is played on a neutral site. So this is Mahomes.
Is that real?
Yeah, it is.
That's crazy. If it is, that's
Yep.
that's
Yeah.
that's
It's
insane.
his first
That is
road playoff game in his career. I think what 6 years, 7 years in now. Yeah. I mean they've been the number one seed pretty much every single year of that he started. So yeah, it's insane to think about that. Yeah. Um. So I think we're gonna see him in an element that we haven't seen, and potentially we could put Patrick Mahomes in a higher pedestal, which I don't think we even thought was possible. Him going to Orchard Park and beating Josh Allen in his home turf this time around. So that's going to be really fun. And hopefully, again, this weekend is much better than this past weekend. There's a lot of mediocre in the NFL. And I think now we've kind of, once you get to the divisional round, you kind of wade your way out. The cream rises to the top. And I think truly these are the best 8 teams left in the NFL currently.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's the best weekend of football, because of that reason, right? It's usually, you might have one or two surprises, but I would say for the most part, I'm happy with the field that we have right now, and the matchups that we could potentially get. So, yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited to see the games, and um, as a Bears fan, just just patiently wait our turn.
We've been doing that for majority of the last 12 years. Is just one playoff appearance in the last 12 years. So we're used to this. We're used to this. We're used to sitting back and watching other teams and other franchises have their fun and rejoice, and seeing the Lions finally getting a playoff victory, after like 15, 16 years. So it's good for them, but selfishly, we want our turn too. So hopefully, this next year, Ryan Poles can make the right decisions. Just get it right. You and me can sit here talk about this all the time. It's his decision, and whether or not, if the process was correct, it's ultimately, if it's right, you're gonna get praised. If it's wrong, you're gonna get fired. It's just the nature of the business, and unfortunately, that's what he signed up for, but not unfortunately because he's getting paid a lot of money. So that's just that. Are you gonna say something?
No, 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 no. Sorry. I mean, yeah. I think that's what we're hoping for, right? It's just that he just makes the right decision. He just makes the right decision. That's all we want. That's all. That's all we've ever wanted.
Yeah. Don't care who it is. Just get it right. Just get it right for once. But
Exactly.
I think, yeah, I think this will wrap us up for this session. Like I said, it's a little different doing recorded. I don't know how well this is going to come out, to be honest with you, but we're going to figure it out, and hopefully we can do this a lot more often. Hopefully I can get a couple more guests on here, and we can continue this moving forward. Hopefully we can get Juan on here again more often too. Is there any last remarks, any comments you want to talk about before end?
No, I mean, just thanks for having me on. This was fun to catch up and talk about the Bears. Maybe in a future episode we can talk about our other favorite Chicago team. But I have a feeling
They are not
there'll
to be
be some
named.
news between now and between now and mid February that I'm sure we'll be able to talk about. So
Oh, I have a lot to talk. We didn't even get into this whole Bulls ceremony, Ring of Honor disaster that happened, but we'll leave that for
don't even get
another
started.
episode.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll leave that for another episode. Hopefully, maybe we'll talk about that other basketball team in Chicago and if anything else happens that's important to us. So, thank you, Juan, for coming on, and I will see you guys later. Okay.
Peace.